Hello, this is My Apologetics. I'm going to look into an organisation that claims to be looking after peace and justice in Sri Lanka. As far as I can work out, are not. Now, the name of the organisation is called the Sri Lanka Campaign for Peace and Justice. It is basically a bunch of activists, academics, celebrity activists in many cases, some of whom have scant knowledge or connection to Sri Lanka. Just to give you an idea of what they are doing, let's just have a look at some of their campaigns. Now, this is from their own website. I've copied and pasted these just to give you an idea of what they consider to be major successes. Gathered thousands of signatures to help amplify the voices of war survivors. Okay, so they started an online signature campaign. Really doesn't matter. It was a civil war. You're going to have unhappy people on both sides. So really, I'm not terribly impressed with that. Help secure UN Human Rights Council mandated international investigation into war crimes in Sri Lanka. Means they've got a bit of connection. Published major opinion forming report featuring allegations of ongoing war crimes in the north of Sri Lanka. And collected accounts and things like that. Now, these are things that anybody can do. Any activist can do this, but the alpha activists tend to do this a lot. They tend to go out there and grab statements from people, and then they put it into a report, and then they hand that report to another alpha activist group, and eventually it gets to the UN and gets a facade of legitimacy to it. Commissioned the help release detained human rights activist Ruki Fernando, never heard of him, and Father Praveen, never heard of him also. And finally, that of the jailed mother of the disappeared person, whoever they are, never heard of them either. Launched a major campaign around the UK Sexual Violence Conference, which forced the British Foreign Secretary to commit to taking action on Sri Lankan asylum seekers. Well, we've got to be very careful when we start looking at things like this as to whether they've actually had any successes. Now, what you're not finding on the website, which is actually produced for the Sri Lanka Campaign, is any mention of the other side. Now, the other side was called the Liberation Tigers for Tamil Elam, also known as the Tamil Tigers, and also going by the initials LTTE. What's not mentioned about them anywhere on the site, well, to any great degree, it's actually glossed over, is the recruitment of child soldiers is not really delved into. Suicide bombers, barely even mentioned, actually never even mentioned in the negative. Bombing campaigns on civilians during the war, not mentioned. The assassination of Rajiv Gandhi in the early 1990s. The assassination of President Premadasa of Sri Lanka, 1992. The assassination of many Tamil leaders who were not LTTE. They basically wiped out any Tamil leader that did not support them. The hacking death of villagers, thousands of them. The expulsion of 80,000 Muslims from LTT-controlled areas. They were given 48 hours to leave, or they would be shot. They left. There are plenty of prominent lies on the site. One of the most prominent lies is, in the month period between January and May 2009, it is estimated between 40 to 90,000 civilians were killed in the north of Sri Lanka. This is ridiculous. Gordon Weiss, one of the most prominent people who produced a book called The Cage about this particular period, made the claim of 40,000. He made this while the book was being promoted. There was plenty of interviews with him where he could actually dispel this. Unfortunately, when the book got produced, his 40,000 guesstimate was dropped down to 10,000. No explanation given other than it was the publisher's fault. Now, why is he a problem? He's a problem because he's the person who's feeding information to these activist groups who are basically acting as apologists for separatism. There are things to do in Sri Lanka that the Sri Lanka Campaign wants you to do. One of those, there are 5 ways in which you can help your visit to Sri Lanka be more ethical. know who to avoid, understand the supply chain, and use ethical alternatives, and get informed and engage. Gee, anyone would think this was a radicalisation program. But let's have a look. Oh, also too, you can read their propaganda sheets. Now, the cage is in there. That's been highly recommended by the Sri Lanka Campaign as a true version of what happened in the war, which has a lot of errors in its campaigning and its situation. It's pretty much a discredited book these days, but still being pulled out by people to justify their activist programs. The most powerful thing you as a tourist can do is go to Sri Lanka and talk to the people about their situation. Ask them how they feel about the war, about the former president, about the media, or about corruption. Wow. You ever think that through? Just think it through, what they're asking you to do. Go to a developing nation with high levels of corruption, just got over their war, a civil war which divided the nation, trying to get some form of peace, and then you go to a person, perhaps in a village, perhaps in a shop, perhaps on the street, and ask their opinions. You're going to get a whole lot of opinions. They're all going to be politicised, they're all going to be polarised, and a lot of people are going to be upset. Go for it. See how long you last doing that. People will tell you off for being a Western idiot. And justifiably so. It's condescending. Oh, and here's one that's really scary. Finally, some organisations sometimes offer homestays with human rights defenders. Read their propaganda, be brainwashed in their houses. I would recommend you stay well away from people like this. This is as close to radicalisation as you will ever get. I certainly recommend it. Now, what they're also trying to do is actually prevent Sri Lanka from actually having a economic balance. Now, the number one important thing, if you want Sri Lanka to share in any form of peace, whether you're Tamil, Muslim, Sinhalese or Burgher, a country which is broke will very rarely enjoy peace, because everybody will be fighting over the remaining resources jealously. Now, if you want to run Sri Lanka broke, you are going to run Sri Lanka back to war. The best thing you can do is allow Sri Lanka to financially get on top of its feet and be able to share more of the wealth around. Everybody will get richer as the country gets richer. And I've seen this with my own eyes. I've been there. I've seen the country turn from absolute poverty to quite a reasonable country that's actually moving somewhere, and ordinary people becoming richer as a result. Now, this is what they've done. Please explore their map. These are the maps drawn up by the organisation, which is the Sri Lanka Campaign, to boycott. They've basically dotted the map with almost every tourist organisation that has some sort of vague connection either to the previous government or some sort of person who has some sort of vague connection to the military. Absolutely nothing has been boycotted that had a vague connection to the former terrorist organisation known as the Tamil Tigers, the LTTE. Yeah, non-partisan. Give me a break. Killing Fields Resorts. They've called one of these the Killing Fields Resorts. The government of Sri Lanka built a series of triumphalist attractions. Triumphalist attractions. Isn't that a wonderful way of phrasing terms? Tens of thousands of civilians were killed in this spot, and yet developments at the site demonstrate the extent to which their suffering is ignored and history rewritten. The local war museum allows visitors to see terraced swimming pool and a grass war memorial. This goes on and on. Okay, let me put it to you this way. I have been there. I've put some videos up on YouTube to actually show you what these look like, and I've looked very closely at these things. There's a lot of things I saw, and I've seen a lot of shut-up buildings, trees without their tops on it, particularly palm trees, because when a bomb hits, it just blows straight up in the air and just takes the top off the tree. And one thing that was really stuck in my mind a lot, both sides of the roads had warnings for landmines. Houses owned by the local people were actually mined by the Tigers. Now, you have to remember, this whole area up there was a war zone. And the Tamil Tigers, when they were retreating from the government, had no hesitation in planting landmines randomly everywhere that they possibly could. That's what I saw. I did not see, as they were claiming, local residents foraging through the belongings of the many people who died in that area, looking for valuables to resell. Now, this article wasn't written that long ago. I was there in 2012. This is a complete deception and an absolute lie. I actually saw Prabhakaran's bunker. That was one of the first videos I published here. 4 stories underground, surrounded by jungle. Susar, head of the Sea Tigers, also responsible for the training of suicide bombers. He was actually building a middle-class luxury home in the middle of the jungle, surrounded by poverty-stricken Tamils, made poor by the war. The luxury swimming pool had one very deep end to it. It was actually used for training suicide bombers and divers, the Sea Tigers. So you have to be extremely careful when you actually look at these campaigns. They look like peace organisations, but they are as bent as anything. Let's have a look at some of the things that they want to do. They want to organise some boycotts. Now let me show you what they're trying to organise. John Keel's and Haley's are probably the two biggest companies in Sri Lanka. They're like, what's the best way to describe it? Like Myers in Australia or Walmart's in the US, that sort of size in comparison to Sri Lanka. They're both conglomerates. They both have, multiple companies. John Keel's, everybody who's either worked in Sri Lanka for John Keel's or worked for companies that supply John Keel's. You just cannot avoid John Keel's. Supermarkets everywhere, a John Keel's supermarket. And the other company is Haley's. Haley's has been in Sri Lanka since 1878. It does a lot of manufacturing, power generation. What are you going to do? Boycott your electricity? Tea factories. You're going to stop drinking tea? Logistics and transport. So they're very similar sorts of diverse sort of companies, but at the same time, they probably handle different things. But chances are, most people in Sri Lanka have worked for it. This includes Tamil professionals and Tamils in factories. A lot of factories have a lot of Tamil workers in it, particularly in Colombo. What they're trying to do, the Sri Lanka campaign, is boycott government attractions. Like, here's one, Pinnawala Orphanage. It's an elephant orphanage set up many years ago, even before the previous government was in power. It's been there for decades. When I first came to Sri Lanka in 1990, I actually ran into the orphanage. I was about to go in there, but we were just running out of time. The second time I went to Sri Lanka, I actually went in there, and I absolutely regret not going there the first time because it's one of the best places in the world. You can actually see elephants being looked after, cared for, and then being returned to the jungle. I fail to see how that's a threat to the local people. Luxla's been there for years. Luxla precedes probably even the war, if I remember correctly. It's a very old establishment, and it just sells arts and crafts. Big threat to the local people. CTB, buses, everywhere. Most people use the CTB bus scheme, or you can take your life into your hands and go on the private buses, which are probably more dangerous than a suicide bomber as far as I can work out. But, that's Sri Lanka. You deal with it. Then we have the Department of Wildlife and Conservation. They must be really oppressing people looking after those animals. Central Cultural Fund. That's kind of weird because they actually restore old ruins, long established thousands of years ago, and their part of their job is actually to look up historical items and get them back into some sort of established sort of way. They've actually done a lot of very good things there, and particularly in Sri Lanka, which is World Heritage listed. It has to be looked after. I don't know where the Martale rest house is, but apparently it's a dangerous place for people these days. Pigeon Island. Pigeon Island is actually quite interesting because there's actually an attack from the LTT on Pigeon Island, if I remember correctly. I'll chase this up and find out for sure. Otherwise, I should actually give you a clarification at some stage. But so, certainly, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, yeah, we're going to ban those. That's not going to happen. That's just a joke. Now, first of all, how do they get their information? Well, they get it from their own sources, of course, but they're actually using TamilNet as a legitimate source. Now, TamilNet is a front. They're a terrorist apologist front. They were set up by Tamil Tiger operatives many years ago, and basically distance themselves from the Tamil Tigers. They're not distanced from the Tamil Tigers in so much as they've obscured their origins from the Tamil Tigers in order to pretend that they're a news service. They're a propaganda service. There's no doubt about it. They're a terrorist propaganda service. They basically take the pro-terrorist view on everything. And there's lots of articles there which they've just responded to. Directly using TamilNet as a source is an indication that you're just not that balanced and not that sensible. There's plenty of things in here. Oh, yeah, I'll get back to this one in just a second. Here's some important stuff. Now, let's look at who is actually running this organisation. Well, they have their volunteers and their organisational structure and council of advisors and board of directors who are mentioned here. I don't advise you try and contact any of these people, because it's not like you're trying to take down some wacky social justice warrior who believes that you should respect their pronouns and goes to university campuses and lights fires. This is the real deal. You're not playing around with these people. These are the academics. This is the alpha level of protest. Some of them actually do believe what they're doing is right. I have no doubt about that. Others are just basically hanger-oners. So if we go down to like an advisory board, there's plenty of people here that just I've never heard of these people. Some of them I have actually heard of, and they're quite unusual people. Like Arnestad wrote My Daughter the Terrorist. Now, if I just have a look here regarding, yep, Betty Arnestad is the filmer of My Daughter the Terrorist, which is basically a journey into looking at a couple of girls who are preparing to do a suicide bomber attack in Sri Lanka. The film was so unusually bent that it's actually being used as a fundraiser for the Tamil Tigers and their front organisations. Another person who was on the advisory board is a Professor Chalane, who wrote Behind the Bloodbath and praises the concept of Elam and condemns India for helping Sri Lanka. We've got Noam Chomsky. Now, what the hell's Noam Chomsky doing in Sri Lanka or concerning himself with Sri Lanka? There's a few other things. Oh, Bruce Haig. Well, yeah, we've got to remember Bruce Haig. Bruce Haig absolutely hates the government of Sri Lanka. Where is he? I'll just bring up his little picture here. Here you go. Bruce Haig. If you see the justice of the Tamil quest for equality in Sri Lanka and do nothing about it, you stand condemned. He also mentioned that Sri Lankan Tamil Tigers migrating to Australia, or ex-Tigers migrating to Australia, pose no threat to Australia. He's either naive or he's a fool or he's being disingenuous. I'm not sure which one. We have Bianca Jagger, Mick Jagger's ex-wife. The suffering of approximately 280,000 civilians cannot be ignored. Okay. Well, I don't know what she's got to do with Sri Lanka. I've chased up as much as I possibly can to see whether Bianca Jagger has actually been in Sri Lanka. I can't see any record of it. She may have gone, but I mean, this is just another celebrity activist, probably just putting a thumbprint on a document saying, yeah, I've been there. Damien Kingsbury is an academic. He always seems to take the pro-separatist line in Sri Lanka. And I actually met him in person once, and I thought he was a nice guy, but I thought his attitude was very strange, because he was sitting there and he said, oh no, this is before the war was over. He was saying, well, to solve the problem, they've got to rewrite the constitution. I was thinking, oh, beautiful. Another Westerner walking into Sri Lanka telling them how to write their own constitution and run their own affairs. Again, it comes across as very condescending, and it comes across as like we know better in the West, when we actually got our own terrorist problems. We really don't know any better. Oh, Anthony Lowenstein. I could write a book on Anthony Lowenstein. Anthony Lowenstein is the crackpot to end all crackpots. He is just a strange character. He's Jewish. Well, he self-identifies as Jewish, with no, like Lowenstein's probably no surprise, but he hates Israel. He also spends a lot of time hanging around the BDS movement, the diversity movement to actually defund and run Israel broke into the ground. He actually got his credentials as a journalist in Israel removed, and I believe he's moved back to Australia now as a result. But he really, really took to loving the Tamil Tigers with everything. See, he likens the disenfranchised Palestinians to Tamils. What a wonderful person. There is a reason why he thinks like that. He had a very close relationship with a lady by the name of Dr. Sam Parry, which is another book in itself. Dr. Sam Parry is basically a signed-up Tamil Tiger, LTT. I've got her documents here. I can actually put those online for you to have a look at. Yes, here they are. This is Dr. Sam Parry. I've blacked out all the places for personal contact, but you can see it's actually in her own handwriting. That's her photograph, and she signed it. That's what we call a slam dunk. And this person, Dr. Sam Parry, is a fundraiser for the Australian Tamil Congress and a front person. She's been on the news. She's been in lots and lots and lots of other things that Al Jazeera, ABC. She's written a couple of articles for The Drum on the ABC website, which is an absolute scandal. Would you allow this to happen if these people were like Al-Qaeda or ISIS? Would you allow them to get on the ABC? No, this is an absolute scandal. I don't know why she's even permitted in this country. And thank you for that, Ms. Parry. You're really changing the whole world. Jack Lynch. I'm trying to remember where Jack Lynch was one of these socialists, but I know that Anthony Lowenstein regularly turns up to the rise of Marxism, or Marxism is really, really cool conferences in Melbourne. So, go figure. What's he doing there? Something nice? Titi Sattelvad. This particular person here got into trouble for falsifying information. This is several years ago. I'll just see if I can just click up this link for you. Here we go. Titi, who was found to have fabricated evidence of atrocities after the Godhra riots in 2002. Now, this is going to be a joke, this person. Why would you actually even allow that person to come near you? They basically just turn you into nonsense. Yasmin Sukra. I believe she's working for Soros now. She got a senior position as a representative of the Soros organisation. Now, she helped produce the report, one of the reports called the Darasman Report, which basically just claims that Sri Lanka did everything and up to 40,000 people might have been killed. It was such a vague report. I did an exposure on that report some time ago and basically looked at all the numbers and none of them added up. I mean, how can you hide 40,000 people in a couple of days? It's just ridiculous. But let's have a look at the things that are really, really important here. The foundation was actually started by, I think it was by the Network for Social Change and the Tinsley Foundations. So none of these two organisations have much interest in Sri Lanka, but they did give the seed money to start this campaign. And why the campaign keeps going? Because people keep giving them money. For no reason, the people keep giving them money. So they received about £110,000 several years ago just to keep going. And there's a lot of things in here that just don't add up. I have no idea why they're doing this, other than could be some good money, or they've got an ideological axe to grind and they would just want to see that separatism happen no matter what. War's over, get over it. It's really just a ridiculous thing to even worry about it. Now, I have actually collated a bit of information on the Sri Lankan terrorism 2013, and there's a typo there, I'll fix that up tonight. The overview is actually telling you exactly what's happening with the Tamil Tigers and things like that, and what's happening with the pro-Tiger sympathisers. But there's a couple of things that you should actually be very, very careful about, because there is illegal activity still taking place and standover tactics still taking place by ex-Tamil Tigers in the Western world. Some of them can't get over the fact that they lost the war, so they still want to raise money and collect weapons. Some of them still don't like the idea that they have no sway over the societies in which they're in, so they want to be standover merchants and send people to brainwashing camps. Thankfully, they can't go to Sri Lanka and get brainwashed and signed up as a Tamil Tiger, like several people in the organisations around the world. But there's plenty of financial evidence that they're trying to keep moving right up into 2013. There's also mention about international narcotics, money laundering, a lot of things like that. Now, there's endless information that tells you what's going on. Here's Dr. Sam Perry again. I mean, I did an expose on Dr. Sam Perry just to show you why we need to keep an eye out for people like this, because she's just basically a front. And I'm not sure whether she really believes what she's in, but it is possible, but it's still a front organisation. Now, the Network for Social Change and Tinsley created this, but I think they've dropped out of the picture entirely. There are some people who have hopped back into the picture, and they basically keep the thing running. My concern is not whether the organisation is in existence. They've got every right to exist. It's just that, are they trying to do damage? Are they being financed to do that damage? Are they having an effect on ordinary people? And are they succouring innocent people who think that they're doing the right thing into signing up for an organisation that is so radical, I don't think you'd want to get involved with them. So it's quite difficult to do that. Now, this year, £18,000 has come from the Institute of War and Peace Reporting. Another £11,000 has come from personal donations. £5,000 have come from direct debits from ongoing contributors, and then the other amount hasn't been reported. I've had a good look at the financial report just to see whether it's actually anything of any use. It's fairly vague, but it's right there. So there you have it. That's the Sri Lanka Campaign for Peace and Justice. Watch out for them. They are not what I'd call a reasonable organisation or even a safe organisation to be hanging around, and there's lots of problems that I've seen with this.